I sat alone in the dimly lit corner of my office, the sound of my own heartbeat pounding in my ears. The papers in front of me blurred as my hands trembled, but not from fear. No, this was something much deeper. A bitter mixture of betrayal and disbelief. The divorce papers, now official, felt like a slap to the face. Wife has demonstrated consistent emotional detachment and has failed to contribute meaningfully to the marriage. Daniel's words jumped out at me, hitting me harder than any physical blow could. I had always known Daniel wasn't the most understanding person, but I never imagined that after everything we'd built, after 5 years of marriage, he would consider me, a failure. The words financially useless burned into my mind, but what hurt more was the finality of his decision. I've met someone better. That's what he had said. That's what he had believed. His better woman had always been just another shadow in our relationship. A name he would mutter when he thought I wasn't paying attention. But now, it was real. He had left me for her. Some young, ambitious woman who, according to him, could give him everything I couldn't. What he didn't know, what no one knew, was that while he was planning his exit, I was finalizing the sale of my business for $1.5 million. I stared at the divorce papers again, but this time, the anger I felt began to turn into something more. Calm, almost like a slow burn. That kind of resolve you feel when you finally realize that your worth was never defined by someone else's opinion. Better woman, he said. Fine. He could have her. He could take the house, the name, whatever he thought would give him comfort. But he would never take the one thing that truly mattered, the future I was building for myself, the future I was forging alone. As the clock ticked away, I glanced out the window of my office, watching the city of Palo Alto come to life beneath me. The sun was starting to set, casting a golden hue over the skyline, and yet, all I could see was the reflection of my own face in the glass. The same face that had been overlooked, dismissed, and taken for granted by the one person I thought I could trust. I turned back to the laptop on my desk, feeling the weight of the moment. Another email popped up from the acquisition team. The deal was about to close. The $1.5 million deal I had worked on for the last year. I had kept it all quiet. My success, my plans, my vision. Because for years, I had learned the hard way that real success doesn't need announcements or grand gestures. It speaks for itself. Daniel had always called what I was building a little project, something that didn't require his attention. He had no interest in understanding what I was creating, let alone the work that went into making it a success. But as I opened the secure folder with the final documents, I felt a strange sense of clarity wash over me. He thought I was nothing, but in reality, I was about to prove just how much I was worth. Not just to him, but to everyone who had ever doubted me. Suddenly, the door to my office creaked open. Amanda, my secretary, stood in the doorway. A soft smile tugged at her lips, but I noticed the gleam of her newly purchased diamond bracelet catching the light, just as it had the day Daniel had given it to me, on our anniversary. The irony wasn't lost on me. Daniel called, Amanda said, her voice nonchalant. He's sending someone over to pick up his things this weekend. I nodded, my voice calm, almost too calm. Thank you, Amanda. I watched her walk away, her steps a little too quick, a little too self-assured. There was something in her walk that made me uneasy. Something telling. As I sat back in my chair, I couldn't help but notice how everything was beginning to piece together. Daniel, his new woman, and Amanda, who had grown strangely distant, preoccupied with her own mysterious plans. I clicked on the final email from the acquisition team again. The deal was set. The sale of my company was officially on its way. $1.5 million, money that would change everything. And yet, there was still this empty feeling inside me. Not from the divorce, not from the betrayal. but from the fact that Daniel would never understand what he had truly lost. As I signed the final paperwork for the company's sale, I felt a sudden calm settle over me. Maybe it was the weight of the money in the air, or maybe it was the realization that I no longer needed anyone to validate me. Sometimes, the best response to betrayal isn't anger or revenge. It's simply allowing people to reveal who they truly are. It had been a week since I signed the final documents. The deal had closed. The money was now officially mine. And yet, despite everything, I couldn't shake the feeling of being trapped in a sick, twisted game of fate. I sat at my desk, sipping coffee, my mind wandering back to the months leading up to the divorce. I had always noticed Daniel's dismissive attitude toward my work. In the early days, I'd chalked it up to his lack of understanding. But after years of tirelessly building my business, gaining recognition in the tech world, and establishing partnerships, his indifference began to sting. I could still hear his voice. "This isn't real work, you're just playing with computers." It always stung. The way he said it, as if everything I'd worked for, everything I'd sacrificed, was just a hobby to him. The truth was, I wasn't just playing at anything. I was building something that could change the world, something meaningful, something I didn't need him to validate. I stared at the phone screen in front of me, a flood of messages from friends and clients, congratulating me on the successful sale. The notifications felt like small doses of validation, but at the same time, they only deepened my resolve. I could feel the weight of my success, yet it wasn't the money that was satisfying. It was the realization that I had done this alone. I hadn't needed anyone's help, especially not Daniel's. Just as I was about to call it a day, my phone buzzed with a new text. It was from one of my old clients, someone I'd worked with on various deals. "You're never going to believe this. Daniel's new girlfriend just took out a massive loan on his property. She's planning to invest in some exclusive real estate project that's supposed to be a sure thing." I put my phone down for a moment, absorbing the information. Something about it didn't sit right with me. I had always known Daniel was reckless with money, but now this new woman seemed to be pushing him into even riskier waters. Maybe it was the way she'd latched onto him. Too eager, too fast, too invested in his financial situation. I was about to call my lawyer when the door to my office swung open. Amanda, ever the picture of composure, stepped inside, her expression unreadable. "Judith," she said quietly, "I just wanted to give you a heads up. Daniel and his new partner have been asking around about your company's valuation. They want to know what you've been working on, and they're offering investors exclusive access to it." I looked up at her, feeling the muscles in my neck tense. "What exactly do you mean by exclusive access?" Amanda hesitated for a moment before replying. "They've been going around, talking about some inside knowledge they supposedly have. And it's starting to sound like they've been using your name to get people to invest in something they're calling an opportunity." My mind raced as I processed what she was saying. They were using my hard work, my reputation, my company to scam people. They were promising investors something they couldn't deliver. "Keep an eye on them," I said, my voice steady, betraying none of the anger building inside me. "And make sure everything you hear gets passed to me." She nodded and left the room, but her words lingered in the air. I could feel the storm brewing, and yet I remained calm, like a predator waiting for the right moment to strike. Daniel and his new woman had no idea what they had just gotten themselves into. It wasn't long before I began to see the pieces of their little game coming together. Daniel and Amanda were so consumed by their false sense of superiority, so sure that they had outsmarted me, that they didn't even see the trap closing around them. For days, I played the role of the woman scorned, the one left behind. I let them believe that I was reeling from the divorce, that I was struggling to come to terms with everything. But the truth was, I was already steps ahead of them. I had no intention of letting them use my name to fuel their scheme. not without consequences. My first move was simple. I pulled Amanda's access to all company systems. It was standard protocol for any employee giving notice, and she'd made it clear that she was leaving. But what she didn't know was that I had already anticipated her departure and had transferred all her responsibilities to a monitored account. I wasn't taking any chances. If she thought she could use my work to mislead investors, I'd be ready. The next day, my team received their retention bonuses from the acquisition, and I made sure Amanda wasn't on the list. As I passed out checks to my loyal employees, I caught sight of Amanda, her face now more smug than ever, walking around with an air of victory. I couldn't help but smile to myself. They were playing checkers, while I was playing chess. Later that afternoon, I overheard a conversation between two of the developers. They were talking about how Amanda had been bragging about her brilliant investment opportunity. She had been telling anyone who would listen about the exclusive deals she was involved in, promising returns that seemed too good to be true. The words hit me like a punch to the gut. She was using the idea of exclusive access to my company's technology to lure investors into her scam. She had been telling them that she had insider knowledge, that I was somehow involved in these deals. It was all lies. At that moment, I knew what I had to do. I had to let them believe they were getting away with it. Let them believe they could deceive people into investing in their fraudulent scheme. And when the time was right, I would let the world know exactly who they were. But for now, I kept quiet, played the part of the jilted ex-wife who was too heartbroken to notice what was happening behind closed doors. I stayed silent, watching as their downfall approached, the walls closing in on them faster than they realized. I had everything under control. 3 days later, I sat in my lawyer's office, finalizing the paperwork for both the divorce and the sale of my company. The deal had been sealed, and with it, I now had something more important than money: power. The kind of power that came from creating something valuable and knowing that the people who tried to break you would ultimately fall because of their own greed. As my attorney pushed the final divorce papers across the table, I signed them with a smile. It wasn't relief that I felt. No, it was something more satisfying. It was the knowledge that while Daniel had assumed I was nothing, that my work was insignificant, I was standing on the precipice of something much bigger than him, bigger than anything he would ever be able to understand. And as I signed my name on that last document, I couldn't help but think, let him chase his quick-fix schemes. I'm building something real. Days passed, and I kept my distance, allowing Daniel and Amanda to bask in their fleeting success. They were so wrapped up in their newfound world of deceit and quick fixes that they didn't realize how dangerously close they were to the edge. I could see the cracks beginning to form, but I was content to let them fall. It started with rumors, whispers from former colleagues and investors who had become suspicious of the exclusive investment opportunities Amanda and Daniel were offering. They had been telling everyone about their incredible, high-return investment scheme, promising guaranteed profits. But the problem was, those promises had no substance. The numbers didn't add up. They couldn't. It was a house of cards, built on lies. One evening, I was sitting in my office, reviewing the latest sales figures from the acquisition, when my phone buzzed with a message from my old VP of engineering. "You won't believe this. Daniel's office is surrounded by angry investors demanding answers." A strange sense of satisfaction washed over me as I read the message. The inevitable had finally arrived. The investors who had put their trust in Daniel and Amanda were beginning to realize they had been duped. The promises they had been sold, about insider knowledge, about groundbreaking investments, were nothing but a facade. By the time I finished reading, another text came in, this one from Tyler in accounting. "Judith, you won't believe it. Daniel just took out a huge loan against his real estate holdings. He's liquidating everything to keep the investment scheme alive." I leaned back in my chair, processing the information. It wasn't just that Daniel was being reckless. It was that he was spiraling, trying to salvage a sinking ship that was already taking on water. And Amanda, with her diamond-studded smile and promises of riches, was only dragging him further into the mess. The irony wasn't lost on me. Just a few weeks ago, Daniel had left me, believing I was nothing, believing I couldn't survive without him. And now, here he was, scrambling for cash, desperately trying to salvage his reputation, while I was sitting on a lucrative deal worth $1.5 million, with the freedom to build whatever I wanted, without anyone to answer to. That night, I received a call from my attorney. "Judith," Barbara said, her voice calm but urgent. "I don't think you'll be surprised, but Daniel's lawyer has reached out. They want to settle the divorce immediately. He's in trouble, and he needs this to be over quickly. I don't think it's about the money anymore. It's about his reputation." I could almost hear the desperation in her voice. She knew exactly what this meant. Daniel was trying to cut his losses and move on, all while trying to preserve whatever shred of dignity he had left. I thought about it for a moment before responding. Let him. The longer this drags out, the more time he wastes. But there was something more to this than just the money. I realized now that I wasn't the only one who had underestimated him. He had never truly seen what I was capable of. He thought I was a failure, that I would crumble under the weight of his dismissal. What he didn't understand was that I had been silently preparing for this moment. Every single step I had taken in my career had led me here, and now all the pieces were falling into place. As I sat there, considering everything that had led up to this point, I knew there was one more thing I needed to do. Amanda had no idea how deeply I had planned for this, but I wasn't going to let her walk away from this unscathed. She had used her position in my life to betray me, to manipulate the trust I had placed in her. She thought she could walk away and enjoy the fruits of her deception, but I had other plans. The next day, I made a call to a private investigator, someone I had worked with before on matters of corporate security. I needed to know everything about Amanda's dealings, where she had been, who she had talked to, and where she had gone after leaving my company. As the investigator began digging into her background, I turned my attention back to the business I was building. I had already moved on from Daniel, from Amanda, from everything they thought would break me. It was time to focus on the future, but I would make sure that when their web of lies finally unraveled, they wouldn't have anyone left to turn to. It didn't take long for the cracks to widen into gaping chasms. The world Daniel and Amanda had carefully built, piece by fragile piece, was starting to crumble around them. It was almost too easy to sit back and watch it all unravel, but there was a certain satisfaction in knowing that every lie they told was eventually going to come back to haunt them. And as much as I wanted to let them self-destruct in silence, I knew they would drag others down with them, and I couldn't let that happen. I had already begun to see the first signs of their downfall. Whispers of lost investments, financial schemes that didn't add up, and angry calls from people who had been sold dreams of wealth that would never materialize. But it wasn't until I overheard a conversation that I knew for sure that their charade was coming to an end. It was a typical Thursday afternoon when I was sitting in my office, reviewing projections for my upcoming expansion, when I heard the unmistakable sound of hushed voices through the glass walls. I stood up from my desk, my curiosity piqued, and walked toward the break room, where two of the developers were talking in low tones. They hadn't noticed me enter. "I heard from one of the investors," the first developer said, glancing nervously over his shoulder. "They're pulling out. They're demanding their money back. They think the whole thing was a scam. They're saying the algorithms Daniel and Amanda were promising don't even exist." The second developer scoffed, shaking his head. "I knew it. I told everyone. We were never building anything like that. We were building a market analysis tool, not some miraculous algorithm to double your money." But Amanda and Daniel convinced those people otherwise. They played them like fools. I could feel my stomach churn at the realization. Amanda had used every ounce of credibility I had built to create the illusion of something greater. She had convinced them that she was the key to unlocking the kind of wealth they could only dream of. And now, just like that, their empire was falling apart. I returned to my office, my mind racing. I knew I had to act, and I had to act fast. The last thing I wanted was for them to drag anyone else down with them. I reached for my phone and dialed Barbara's number. "Judith," she answered after a few rings. "Is everything okay?" "I need you to make a few calls," I said, my voice steady. "Find out everything you can about Daniel's financial situation. I want to know exactly how much trouble he's in. Get in touch with the investors who were involved in that exclusive deal. And I need you to check with the local authorities. Something tells me things are about to escalate quickly." Barbara didn't hesitate. "I'll get on it right away. I'll keep you updated." As I hung up the phone, I felt a strange sense of calm settle over me. It was a calm born of clarity. Clarity that came from knowing exactly where I stood. I had built something solid. Something that wasn't based on lies or half-truths. My business was thriving, and I was in control. But more than that, I had seen the end game unfolding, and I wasn't going to let them get away with it. The next day, I received word that the FBI had begun an investigation into Daniel and Amanda's activities. It seemed that their little scheme had attracted the attention of more than just their investors. The authorities had uncovered evidence of multiple fraudulent transactions linked to the exclusive investments. They were in deep, and there was no way out. It felt like a moment of poetic justice. The very thing Daniel had dismissed me for, my hard work, my dedication, was now the key to exposing their fraud. They had used my reputation to line their pockets, and now it was time for them to pay the price. I spent the next few days in meetings with my new partners, finalizing the next steps for the expansion of my company. My mind was focused on the future, on the new projects we were about to launch. But as much as I tried to focus on the work in front of me, I couldn't help but keep one eye on the news. Every day brought new updates about Daniel and Amanda's unraveling. Their world, built on deception, was crumbling faster than I could have ever imagined. It was almost too easy to watch. A few weeks had passed since the investigation into Daniel and Amanda's fraudulent schemes began. The media was buzzing with reports of their downfall, the once celebrated couple now reduced to a cautionary tale about greed and deception. It was hard to ignore the feeling of satisfaction that washed over me as I followed the unfolding drama. There they were, caught in their web of lies, tangled in their own ambition, and facing the consequences of their choices. For all their talk about success and easy money, it was my hard work, my dedication, that had paid off. And now, as they scrambled to cover their tracks, my business was flourishing. The $1.5 million from the sale was just the beginning. It had provided me with the foundation to expand globally, to build something truly meaningful. My team was stronger than ever, and our AI platform was helping hospitals improve patient outcomes while revolutionizing climate modeling. We were on the verge of something bigger, and I was no longer held back by the mistakes of my past. But despite all the success, there was still a lingering curiosity. I wanted to know how it would all end for Daniel and Amanda. I knew they would eventually face justice, but there was something inside me that craved closure, something that would put an end to the story they had written about me. One afternoon, I received a call from Barbara. "Judith, you won't believe this," she said, her voice tinged with a mix of excitement and disbelief. "Daniel's been arrested. The FBI found evidence of wire fraud, money laundering, and conspiracy. They've been tracking him for months, and now they've got him. Amanda, on the other hand, has disappeared. She's gone, vanished without a trace. The authorities suspect she took off with most of the stolen funds." For a moment, I sat in silence. Part of me had expected this, but hearing the confirmation was like a weight lifting off my shoulders. The worst of it was over. The people who had tried to bring me down, to manipulate me, to use my own success against me, were now paying for their choices. But there was something else, a sense of closure. As I stood on the rooftop of our office building later that evening, watching the sun set over the horizon, I reflected on everything that had happened. The pain, the betrayal, the heartbreak. It all seemed so distant now, a faint memory overshadowed by the light of my success. Daniel had never understood me. He had never seen the value in what I was building, and he had certainly never believed in my ability to thrive without him. But now, I had everything I needed. I had proven that I was more than just a woman scorned. I was a force to be reckoned with, a creator, a visionary. And while he and Amanda chased quick fixes and empty promises, I had built something real, something that would leave a lasting impact on the world. The following month, I stood on stage at a global tech conference, delivering a keynote speech about the future of AI and the ethical responsibilities that came with technological innovation. As I spoke, I couldn't help but notice the irony. Here I was, an empowered woman who had built $1 billion business from the ground up, while Daniel and Amanda were left to face the consequences of their greed and deceit. After the speech, a young woman approached me, clutching her diploma from Stanford. "I read about what happened with your ex-husband and former secretary," she said, her voice filled with admiration. "It must feel satisfying to see them get what they deserved." I smiled softly, looking down at her. "I don't focus on their downfall," I said. "I'm too busy building something real. Success isn't about getting even. It's about creating something meaningful." As I walked away from the conference, I couldn't help but feel that the story had finally come full circle. The woman who had been overlooked, dismissed, and betrayed had not only survived, but had thrived. She had built something that was changing lives, something that had the potential to make a real difference. And as for Daniel and Amanda, well, they had chosen their path. They had chased fleeting dreams, only to see them shatter in the end. But I was moving forward, building the future I had always dreamed of, leaving the past, and them, behind.